Hello, people of the world. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it, especially return visitors. Today, I want to talk about September 11th. Really, I should have done this as the first post because this is the genesis of how I learned about the number 33, which is what I'm going to be informing about. The event of September 11th was all numerology, and 33 was at the very focal point of it. I want to begin in 1961 when the building was first proposed by David Rockefeller on March 11th, 311. That's an important date in history. It connects to World War II and the beginning of this country. The next day, the project was approved and funded. The governor then was Nelson Rockefeller. Relatives, the two Rockefellers, proposed by a Rockefeller, approved by a Rockefeller. There's this practice called gematria. It is the practice of coding names, words, and phrases into numbers, and it dates back to Pythagoras. It's an old system. If you watch my other videos, I've explained it. I don't have time to explain this video, but I'm going to tell you what calculations are. The World Trade Centers, the two towers, three towers fell that day. The two tallest were 110 stories. The name Rockefeller in gematria sums to 110. And remember, this building was proposed and approved by Rockefellers. The word president also equals 110. The name Adolf Hitler equals 110. There's another method to add, and that's where you reduce the letters in sum so you get a smaller value, but no matter what method you use, it'll always come to the same single digit. If you reduce the word president, it sums to 47. The third building to fall that day was Building 7 of 47 floors. So the project was approved in 1961. The ground was commemorated in the year 66, where construction would begin, and construction began in 1968. That's 33 years before 2001. It began August of 68. That's also the same year, 1968, that 911 was made the National Emergency Dialing Code, and George W. Bush graduated from Yale and Skull and Bones. George W. Bush's birthday is July 6th, 1946. 7 plus 6 plus 1 plus 9 plus 4 plus 6 sums to 33. That's George Bush's life number. We all have a life number. That's how you calculate it. Bill Clinton, who was the president prior to Bush, was born Bill Blythe. He changed his name to Clinton, which has a gematria of 33. Also in 68, MLK and RFK were assassinated. The year MLK was assassinated, 68, was the first year Ford's Theater was reopened. That's the building where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and after it was closed after his assassination, it didn't open again until 1968, this year that all this stuff went down. It stayed open for 9 years, an important number in occult numerology and to Pythagoras, who invented this system of gematria. It closed in 77. It didn't reopen again until Obama became the president, and he was handed an illuminated plaque, as referred to by Abraham Lincoln, or the person playing the part of Abraham Lincoln. Anyhow, so from 68, this is also the year Space Odyssey 2001 came out. It's the year Planet of the Apes came out. Fast forward to 33 years later, September 11th, 2001. The day before September 11, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld announced that the Pentagon could not account for 2 trillion with a T. That's an incomprehensible amount of money, people. And this money was supposedly lost in the years 1999 and 2000 while Clinton was still the president. And Donald Rumsfeld made this announcement on September 10th, 2001. And it's the front page story on a lot of newspapers that day. And it talked about how the Pentagon was going to have to clean up, drastically reduce its budget, and there was going to be a new future for the military. Well, all that was thrown out the window the next day because of September 11th, 2001. And doesn't that seem curious? Also, I want to look at this date, September 11th. A lot of people don't know this, but there's an old world calendar called the Coptic calendar. It's like what the Egyptians went by. September 11th is New Year's Day on the Coptic calendar. Before the Bush administration came into power in 2001, many of their members, Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld, Richard Pearl, and several others who became members of this administration, they wrote something called the Project for a New American Century. And it was about creating a Pearl Harbor-like event to change the nation's foreign and domestic policy. And then you just think about what's happened here since 2001, and you think about what's happened internationally, and we've essentially been in perpetual war ever since. Okay, so the date, September 11th, 2001. In numerology, that date could be 9 for the month, 11 for the day. You don't have to reduce 11 because it's a master number. And then the year is 2001. The number 2001 is 2 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1, which equals 3. So in numerology, this date can become 9/11/3, a compacted date. Now get this. In 93, there was a World Trade Center bombing on February 26th. The span of days from February 26th, 93 to September 11th, 2001 was 3,119 days, or 3/11/9. The reverse of 9/11/3, like the date compacted in numerology. In this gematria, the phrase I am reads 9113, like this date, I am. So maybe 9/11 was an I am statement for the Freemasons, who have a highest degree of 33, or whoever is responsible for this act. So, I want to go back in time. 93 World Trade Center bombing, 3,119 days later, September 11th, 2001. These numbers line up. Think about the Manhattan Project. The word project in gematria equals 33. And if you learn about the Manhattan Project, you find out that most of the testing was about underground demolitions. And they did this for several decades. And they shut that program down. Bill Clinton closed it near at the beginning of his presidential administration, just before the 93 World Trade Center bombings. And honestly, people, what I think they were doing all that time was testing for how to demolish those towers the right way. I think that's what they were doing outside of Vegas, where this program went on for decades of underground, supposedly nuclear bombing. I think they were figuring out how to demolish those towers, and that's why they called it the Manhattan Project. Where were the World Trade Centers? They were in Manhattan. They called that site Ground Zero. If you look up the definition of Ground Zero, it's the site where supposedly a nuclear bomb explodes above or below the surface of the earth. The definition even gives way to the idea below ground. As for 33 and 93, think of the 93 World Trade Center bombing. Flight 93 was the plane on 9/11 that supposedly didn't hit either of the buildings and didn't hit the Pentagon. Supposedly it crashed in Pennsylvania, known as the Keystone State. The word Keystone in gematria equals 33. And it crashed supposedly near Indian Creek. The word Indian sums to 33. The word Creek also happens to sum to 33. And there's not a lot of 33 words out there, so don't get that impression. If you go back and watch the news, you can do a YouTube search for that crash, and you can watch the footage from that day. You'll find that the witness for that crash was named Emma Bergen, and she gave her testimony at the Hilton Hotel. Well, it so happens the name Bergen equals 33, and it happens that Hilton equals 33. The name Hilton comes from Norway, which is one of only 8 countries in the world with a 33 name. The name Jorgen comes from Norway, which means George in English. The name Jorgen is 33, the name George is 39. 39 is the reverse of 93. Also on that day, with numerology, just to show you something, the Pentagon, get this, the Pentagon sits across from the Washington Monument. The Washington Monument is 555 feet tall. The Pentagon is 5-sided, War Department, 5 floors with an exact 5-acre court in the middle. The building is 77 feet tall total, and it sits on the 77th meridian, which cuts through Washington, D. and some of the eastern seaboard. It's known as the American Meridian. It was Flight 77 that hit the Pentagon, this building of 77 feet tall on the 77th meridian. Flight 93 had 33 passengers on board, supposedly. There's so much numerology in 9/11, It's a lot of 11s, 33s, 47. Building 7 was 47 floors tall. The name Osama bin Laden in gematria sums to 47. And if you can go back in time and remember, in the media he was referred to as a cave dweller. Cave dweller. This term came to be. Bush would even use it. Cave dweller sums to 47. That's how coded this stuff is. So that's what this post is about. I'm trying to wake us up to what's really going on. These are Freemason plans. They date way back. Senator Bob Kerrey, who was a part of the 9/11 Commission, you can look him up on YouTube. He has admitted that a 9/11 was more than a 30-year conspiracy. Like I said, it at least goes back to 1968, but I really think it goes back even further. The book, The Lord of the Rings, which we're all familiar with, the second book, that book series was released in 3 parts, just like the movie. The second book was called The Two Towers, and it was released in history on November 11th, 11/11. Think about the World Trade Centers. They were like massive 11s over the Manhattan city skyline, and after they fell from March 11th to April 14th, they did a 33-night tribute.